This is the story of the stereo. In the last episode, Jamie and I founded the stereo after the collapse of our previous bands, driven by a desire to explore new musical frontiers. Now it was time to turn the double-headed creative monster of a concept into a 13-song album. Wigged Out Studios in Minneapolis had 24 tracks of ADAT, a short-lived recording format that used VHS tapes. Just enough microphones, stands, and outboard gear to make a record, and a daily rate that was perfect for our indie label budget. Also perfect for our budget, borrowing the drum kit that Jamie would play on all of 300 from Jay Clark of Pretty Girls Make Graves.
But yeah, we got that really cool DW, the red DW kit, and we were like, oh, we got a great drum kit. And at the time, we thought our amps were super badass. I know we had like Mesas and Marshall cabs, and we're just like, oh, this is going to be so good.
You know, we had this great gear, but a lot of it was borrowed, and we were just kind of doing everything through favors that were owed to us. And you know, recording in an ADAT studio in a basement is not what I would have guessed.
Yeah, I mean, especially considering, like, if you could take a picture of what it was that we were doing, you'd be like, that's this? You were doing that to make it? Like, if
you could even take a picture, because there was probably one lamp in the corner trying to light the whole room.
It was very dark.
Yeah.
It was like very gloomy. It was cold. Our hands were cold all the time. Remember, we kept going upstairs to wash our hands, not for hygiene, but just for warmth.
Right.
And then, of course, there was like a cat litter box at the other end of it. So it was just like a big kitty litter box that we were recording in. It just stunk.
Right. And we were trying to get everything recorded while the people who lived in the house above us were at work, right? So we were basically...
That's right, yeah.
Recording during the work day.
Exactly. Yeah, and there was he lived in the basement. So like his bed was right there. It just was like... There's this dirty laundry. Okay, let me put down this bass. You know what I mean? Like, I want to say it took us about 10 days, like 2 weeks. And I think we probably took weekends off because, like, as you said, they were not at work.
And we did a couple of remote recordings because the piano parts, we actually went to your roommate Karen's parents' house where they had an actual piano. And we took one of the ADATs, right?
As far as I can recall, we were the worst piano players.
You know, it's funny because one of the main things that sticks out to me was the time where you got furious at me, and I wonder if you even remember this, but you were recording Divine, which is like a 7-minute long song. I'm looking at it right now. It's 6 minutes and 14 seconds. You were recording Divine, and I stopped the ADAT, and I said, I think you can do it better.
And I got mad at you?
You were furious because I basically had made like an executive decision. And when I say furious, you know, it's all relative to my level of sensitivity as a 22-year-old or however old I was.
Right. Well, I apologize.
No.
Rory, I'm sorry. Why did you blow my take? I was nailing it, and you just came in and you're like, again.
These early days also marked the first, but not the last time that the stereo would engage with the world of major labels. Fueled by Ramen was years away from their first deal with a major, but even back then the first tentative connections were being made.
We had given the demo that we had made in Austin to John, and I remember him being pretty blown away, pretty happy about it, and we were sending rough mixes to people at Capitol and Interscope of what we were doing because, like, I think John was like, I've got you, but they're going to probably take you. That was exciting because we'd already met, like, Craig Aronson because he signed Less Than Jake, he signed Jimmy Eat World, and I'm sure we were just like, oh my God, this is so weird. Like,
it's really happening.
Yeah. Or at least we thought that, you know what I mean?
I remember getting promo records.
Oh, yeah, and we got a really big care package from Capitol, right? Jimmy Eat World's Clarity. I still have it was a promo. It wasn't even like a proper disc, you know what I mean? And I remember you and I thinking, God, remember this because this will be what we talk about later.
From the beginning, the stereo looked to pair a visual language with the music, most notably demonstrated by the debut album artwork. Jamie's slick graphic design sensibilities paired with a do-it-yourself punk rock ethos resulted in a method that, much like the rest of the process for making 300, found creative ways to deliver an appearance that exceeded the expense.
At that point, I was already like an Apple computer fanboy, and there were like the Gap commercials at that time, where everybody was like swing dancing against the cyclorama, which like an all white room. And somehow we came up with this idea, and I don't remember how, but we wanted to take a picture that was like in that type of environment, like a no environment, right? That shot was done with a local photographer, a friend of ours who kind of did some modeling, and it was all done in my apartment. It's not like I lived in some photography studio. It was like there was couches and tables, and we took about 2 hours and we completely cleared out my living room. So it was just like we were almost like moving out. And we'd gone to an art store and bought like a couple of rolls of white poster paper, and we taped it from the ceiling and curled it down, gradually to the floor, and went out about another 10 feet. And we did this all through one side of the apartment. If you look back at the extra shots, you can see tape, clear tape, and the paper seams and little crinkles. And I just went through and I just painstakingly went through and just airbrushed it all out. We are taking the extra mile that bands don't normally take. And I'm not saying we invented that, but we did discover it. You know what I mean? Like for ourselves, and we used it.
To me, also, I was just super in love with the mod aesthetic at that point. So I had dyed black hair in those photographs, and we're wearing the black. And so you've got the record, you've got the songs, but then there's this other component to it that isn't just some dudes in cargo shorts or
right. And
whatever.
I've always thought that it was like, we sort of like took a part of an aspect of being in a band that wasn't sort of viewed as important, and we added our own importance to it, and it made us stand out. I think. I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong about this, but like, it'd be like August in Minneapolis, and we're wearing like button-up shirts with like black sweaters over the top of them, and the collars out, and like we look like Vulcans, on some away mission,
After tracking our precious labor of love to a bunch of VHS tapes, we went about the work of finding just the right talent to add the finishing touches. Lucky for us, one of the best independent music producers in the country was willing to dump our cassettes onto actual 2-inch reel-to-reel tape and give it fit and finish at one of the country's most revered independent music recording studios. Inner Ear Studios in Washington, D.C. was recording headquarters for Fugazi, and also one of the favorite workspaces for the producer at the top of our wish list. I remember being totally enamored with Jay Robbins and his work on the Braid record, Frame and Canvas, and Promise Ring, Nothing Feels Good. Those were, in my opinion, like the two best sounding independently released records of that time. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that being my sort of like pie in the sky dream version of it. Like, hey, what if we could get Jay Robbins to mix this?
I think the dream was of us just jet setting around, was the reality was kicking in, and we could only send one of us to DC.
Well, I almost just remember kind of deferring, because really you produced that record. Like you definitely had all of that knowledge and had really driven that piece of it. So it really only made sense if we're not both going to be out there and we want to have a representative on site.
Yeah, I think that was the discussion. That was the reasoning about choosing who, you know what I mean? It was just like, well, I tracked it. I know what's all the stuff, you know what I mean? But like, don't forget, you did cut me off in Divine. And that, you did. But no, I went out there and I was pretty hands off for the most part. I had some opinions about how I wanted things to kind of be. But I just let Jay do his things. I would spend my time just kind of in the living room, the lounge at Inner Ear, and I would just sort of wait for him to go, okay, come in, and I would like go in and listen to something. And
well, and I remember that we really wanted him to have a production credit on the record.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why I was like, well, do it. You're the guy. You're the guy from Jawbox, right? Yeah, go ahead. Like, I'm sure you know best,
The Stereo's debut album 300 wasn't a smash hit in 1999, but a decade later, alternative press would recognize it as one of the top 10 most influential records of that year. I talked to Scott Heisel, former managing editor for Alternative Press, about how the album earned that distinction.
So that was my special. I did that special every year in Alternative Press where it was, we call it the class of whatever. And it was always the 10-year look back at 10 classic records that kind of shaped the scene that we were in at that point, right? So I started that in 2006. And so when we got to 99, I'm like, well, it's a no-brainer. I have to include the stereo. Like, come on. To me, it's really important that we don't forget our past and we don't forget where things started and how things grew. And there wouldn't be Fall Out Boy if there weren't the stereo. The byline for the piece, I believe, says Luke Jackson, which is a pseudonym. It was actually Jeff Rosenstock.
300 is a very big sounding record to me. I think it's a very good sounding record.
Punk rock pioneer, Jeff Rosenstock.
And I don't like a lot of rock production, especially big rock production. I feel like usually everything gets flattened at the expense of making everything feel big. But that record felt big, and it felt like it had a lot of life to it.
It's a true story, 2 a.m. You pulled me out of bed so we could go bowling. Right at the alley, I made a turkey. It never works, but the possibility is always there.
And I still have my copy of the CD that I bought at the record store I worked at using like in-store credit I got for working under the table. And I remember just thinking like, what is this and how good is this? And then trying to, use the early internet to read about it, which is, nigh impossible at that point. And learning about the whole process, that it was the two of you as Jamie and Rory, and that, he was in Minneapolis and you were in Austin. And I just thought, what a cool concept and what a cool idea.
So talking to him about it and realizing that it was just the two of you in a small room, that made me feel like, I don't know, I didn't realize that it was made like that. I didn't realize that you can make something that sounds that good just kind of winging it. And it also resonated with me because that's how I was making my records at the time.
The stereo have always felt like a secret. It's one of those secrets that you want to tell everybody. Like, you're not trying to keep it a secret, but like people just don't want to pay attention. I worked at AP for 10 years, right? 10 and a half years. And you never knew if you wrote something or if you put something in the magazine, if anyone would actually read it. You just didn't. You have no idea. It's print media, right? But I hope that kids reading that piece got turned on to an amazing record, and I hope they continue to spread the gospel, right? It's kind of like my version of like the Velvet Underground, which is like, well, not a lot of people heard the first record, but everyone who did started a band.
To take the stereo from being a carefully conceived concept to becoming a real live band, we need to go through the recruiting process. We reached out to many less familiar candidates, but would ultimately land much closer to home with former Animal Chin drummer Jeremy Tapero.
When you guys started making that record, I was in Austin playing with the Gloria record at the time. Playing in the Gloria record was awesome, and I loved those guys and that music, but the part that I didn't really put together until much later was they were coming off of Mineral looking to slow down and not be on the road and not push so hard.
We are like looking all throughout the country for, because we're split apart. You were in Austin, I was in Minneapolis. Like, what's the point?
You guys were ambitious, and if you were going to put this thing together, it was going to go do things, and it was going to try really hard. And I had worked at that basement studio that you guys cut that record in previously, so I kind of knew where you were at up there, and I was just like, I wonder what the hell they're making down in that dingy ass basement studio.
So we had an audition with two guys.
It seemed like he was excited about the bass player, questionable on the drummer, and then when I made it clear that I would make myself available, it kind of seemed like you guys were just like, okay, then we're just going to take Tapero. He'll be the drummer.
And I don't even think we tried out Jeremy. He just sort of like learned the material. And that was that. And then, so we had the Jeremys.
From the jump, it felt like a regular, real band right away. It didn't feel to me like me and the other Jeremy Burgo, bass player, were like the hired guys and it was your project. It just felt like 4 guys in a van.
The stereo was now an actual band. But much like every other step in our development, our first show would not fit the typical mold. My memory is that our first show was a house show in Round Rock. Is that right?
Wrong.
Okay. Where was our first show?
Our very first was on morning news television.
Okay, thanks for setting me straight.
It was the morning news, like I don't know what channel or whatever. We were there at like 4 a.m. We had to be there at 4 a.m. and we had to play at like 7 or something like that. But like because that it was like a working operational TV studio, we had to set up and like do quick bits of line check while they were at commercials, while they were like broadcasting commercials. And when we started playing a song, the anchor lady's mic was still on, and we were so loud in the studio because I think they were used to having like fiddle players and acoustic guitars, and then we're in there with full Marshall half stacks and stuff. And we started playing, and you can hear the lady scream. She's like, it's so loud. Like she's like running away from our band. I think they came up and interviewed us, during a thing. You guys are the stereo, And then obviously the first question is, so where are you guys from? And the lady puts the mic in front of my face, and I say, Austin, Minnesota.
For me, the next few months of touring with our new band, that's something that I look back on fondly. We hit the road with our friends, took out up-and-coming bands, and opened up for local hometown heroes. We played songs that I loved to a vibrant, music-obsessed underground scene. But I can't help but color these memories with a foreshadowing of what, even all these years later, I refer to in my podcast outline notes as Rory's exit. It's hard for me to acknowledge, even when I'm just typing it out, that I was kicked out of a band that I helped start. I mean, I was half of the full stereo, right? So without me, isn't it going to be the mono or something? Years of separation made it easier to lay these old wounds bare, but I have to admit that it wasn't easy bringing up such vivid memories of insecurity. Starting with one fact that even those familiar with our history knew nothing about. I think people who know the band know that I ended up not being with the band anymore. I've seen it written a couple of different ways. If you look up on like Apple Music, it's put very diplomatically, something to the effect of Phillips left the group, but Wolford pressed on. And so there's kind of a sense of me just, I'm not really feeling this band anymore. I don't want to be in it. So for some context, the thing that I remember was just a general, Rory cares more about freaking out on stage than actually playing his guitar in time. And so there was kind of like Jesus, would Rory just like play the songs and sound good? And there was the guitar piece of it, but then also just vocally. It's something that I do adequately sometimes and is basically just a way to be able to perform the songs that I write. Right?
Well, I mean, I think you sell yourself a little short when you say something like that because, you don't have exactly like the sort of the virtuoso thing, but it doesn't matter. I almost wonder if that would even help you. It might even be a deficit to you because it like might get in the way of your intent. I know that I probably like shared in that sort of belief that you sort of exposed just now, that I was just like, Rory's not pulling it. So sort of like, come clean about a lot of stuff with you. Like at the time, I can remember I had like an unhealthy amount of ambition to make this work. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say, I just kind of think I was prepared to walk over people that were helping me if it meant I could get a notch further. I was immersed in this idea that like if it wasn't hard and if it wasn't uncomfortable and wasn't difficult to accomplish, then it wasn't the right idea. I mean, it's absurd when I say it out loud to you now. I've fortunately got to the point where I don't nowadays in my life. I'm not going to burn a bridge or break a heart in order to do something.
But I don't think most people would know that I actually got kicked out twice. Do you remember that?
You got kicked out of the band twice?
I got kicked out twice, and let me tell you my memory of it. We were in Minneapolis, and essentially the long and the short of it was like I don't know that I really want to do this as me and you anymore. And then I proceeded.
This is something I said?
Yeah, and then I proceeded to do the super mature step of getting back to your house, going to the grocery store, buying a bottle of vodka, and basically just trying to drink myself to blacked out drunk. Do you remember that?
I remember the drunk thing. I don't exactly remember the conversation, but it's hard to forget the other part. I'll be honest. It was probably like I was taking the temperature.
Right.
There was, probably a little bit of like, maybe if I say this, maybe he'll quit, which is it's a cop out.
With 2 songwriters in the band, the Stereo were nothing if not prolific. We set up a session to record some new demos at Coney Island in Madison, Wisconsin, only a few months after our first show, enlisting the help of Coney Island founder, Smart Studios engineer, and eventual documentarian Wendy Schneider. One song I wrote for that session was called We Are Young. Tracking the vocals for that song would turn out to be unexpectedly challenging. So we went into the studio with Wendy Schneider, and the reason that session sticks out when we're talking about me exiting the band is that I just have really vivid memories of recording the song We Are Young, and I had written this vocal part that was pretty much falsetto, like super high end of my range.
You say it's been a long time since it's felt like your first time, and you don't know why.
I think even in the recording, you can still hear it kind of cracking in, and it's painful that now through 5 minutes of auto-tuning, it probably would have been fine and passable, but we were doing it to tape. I needed to actually do it, and it was that psyching myself out, like first take is not that great, and then I know everybody is listening and doesn't really think I'm a very good singer, and let me try it again, and then probably second take is maybe worse. I remember going in, doing the part, coming into the control room, and it was like stepping into a wake.
We were all know-it-alls, and we all wanted it to be awesome, and I'm sure that we were not necessarily very friendly to each other when it was time to be like, yo, man, what's up with not getting that note?
There was definitely a cloud of sort of anguish surrounding that recording session. It really does break my heart listening to this and knowing I was there and knowing that I was not either mature enough or cognizant of being able to help you. And so we probably went out on tour after that too. Like the best way to fix that type of anguish is to put us all in a white rolling box.
I just remember things slowly starting to crack. I remember Wolford kind of pulling me aside and being, before it happened, just like, I don't know if I can do this thing with Rory anymore.
It felt like we were on tour when we did that session, and then when we got to the end of that tour, that was when you didn't kick me out. It wasn't, okay, Rory, this is it, you're out of the band.
Yeah.
I was just asked, or it was suggested that I take my Marshall cabinet with me. And
take your gear.
Yeah.
Because we're going to come back and you may need it. I'll be honest with you. It was a complete chicken shit move. Like instead of like talking you face to face. And if I can recall, I wasn't sure. But I will tell you the moment in which I sort of like because I got sure and then I wasn't sure. Right. And I'll tell you the exact moment that I was going to throw you into a ditch.
Okay, I want to hear this.
Okay. So we had just played, I think we played Emos. We're driving around looking for a party, and I remember we were parked in this weird neighborhood, and we were like, it's supposed to be here, but it clearly wasn't here.
So I remember you being like, before we go to whatever we were doing, whatever was happening, you were like, I need a Walgreens or a something I can't see. I need contact lens solution. And it was just like it wasn't in the schedule, or there was some reason why Jamie wasn't having it.
And, you were mad at me. I was mad at you. I apparently now was mad at you because we were taking it to some party that you couldn't find or something like that, right?
And you needed contact lens solutions. And I think you were maybe a couple of beers into your evening, which at this point also, Jamie didn't do any drinking. I don't think I did either. And you didn't do a lot of drinking, but you would have a couple beers. You're a Texas dude. You know what I mean? You'd have a couple beers at the end of the night. And you were a little bit louder than the normal average bear before a couple of beers. So after a couple of beers, You turn that up a little more, and Jamie just did not know how to handle that.
And I'm not even joking, dude, and I'll never forget this. You leaned your head into the window of the van, and in my face, like 6 inches from my face, you go, "My eyes are fucking burning."
My eyes are fucking burning. And you were just screaming at him. And I think he rolled up the window and was like, I don't want to be in a band with him anymore.
I looked at Tapero, who's sitting shotgun, and Tapero goes, "I would have smacked him in the face." Just matter of fact.
I think me and Berger weren't super helpful to either of you because we were just kind of stuck in the middle. I don't know, you two figure it out, man. I don't think we really stepped in and tried to mediate.
And I get why you were mad. It had nothing to do about your eyes burning or not. It was you were pissed at me.
It sounds like I was just kind of mad at you, and just at that point, I probably also had maybe checked out a little bit, just as a self-protection mechanism, feeling that things were coming to an end, and so it's just easy for me to.
Yeah. Well, the party's over. Fine. Well, I'm gonna fucking flip over the table and piss on the pizza.
We had started with a part of our story that most people didn't know. And now, as we concluded, Jamie would reveal to me the other side of what happened after I was let go in Austin.
Interestingly, now that I'm thinking about it, I wanted to quit. I don't know if we've ever actually completely fully discussed this, but I actually was not going to, I decided to leave. I was just I will just start over. I didn't want to kick you out. I wanted to quit. And I was I'm just going to go home and I'm going to quit. And I didn't want to have your gear 2,000 miles away. So I chicken shittedly, is that a word? Said, take your stuff because we're going to start the next tour down in Austin. We'll come down again, which just lies because I didn't want to fire you. But I also didn't know if I wanted to fire you. I think I wanted to quit. I think I was convinced. And I think by the time we got to Oklahoma, I had had enough conversations with John on the phone and then just Tapero sitting next to me. And we're okay, well, let's ask Rory to leave. You know what I mean? We obviously can't continue with this sort of animosity, this cloud, I remember after the very next tour, I'm not even joking, dude, and this should give you some warm fuzzies. There was kids in the audience with signs that would say, "Where's Rory?" All marker, added protest. I'm there's 80 people here. What do you need a sign for? Just shout it. You know what I mean? And I've said it many times. I regret it. I regret us not we didn't do anything really to try to mend this. We just made a decision and then we almost sort of curated an environment to let it be reinforced, that recording in Madison was probably sort of unwittingly a setup. I don't mean to sound so sinister. It wasn't methodical. It wasn't even done like that. But there was probably an attitude, we probably were being I'm so embarrassed to say this to you. You know what I mean? It's we were bullies, Oh God, this is the one moment so far that we've been talking where I'm just literally I want to kick my own ass. I'm so sorry, I'm sorry. I am really sorry, Rory.
Thanks. And I'm sorry too. And we were both young, and I think it's good that we can look back on it. We
are young.
Yeah, we were young. Hopefully the person that was holding the "Where's Rory" sign is going to listen to this podcast, and then they'll have some more context to it. Look at some of the details. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I got kicked out, but the stereo would carry on. After all, losing one member, that just means you have to find one replacement. It's not like the entire band got fired, right?
Well, there's only everybody else that I still need to kick out of the band. So,
We hope to see you next time for another episode of Kings of No Hope, the story of the stereo. Kings of No Hope is written and produced by me, Rory Phillips. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram @RoryATX. The Stereo are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Stereo Rock, and you can listen to their music on Spotify, Apple Music, or by unearthing wax cylinders buried with the body of Thomas Edison in 1931.